with the state-owned petroleum companies in the Middle East. Why Ruto chose to characterize the deal as a G2G is the first red flag that points to mischief in this deal. We now know that the characterization of this deal as a G2G was meant to shield the three Kenyan companies from paying the 30% corporate tax. I will return to this matter later. 2. The shilling has continued to fall against the dollar. The cost of oil has not come down since the deal was signed. 4. The scarcity of the dollar has continued. 5. The landlocked countries that depend on us for oil are abandoning our pipeline because it has become too expensive. In other words, the deal has not addressed any of the problems Ruto said it would. When Ruto initiated this deal, the US dollar to the Kenya shilling exchange rate was 132. Today, 6 months later, it is Kenya shillings 159 to the dollar. The cost of fuel shot up significantly after the deal. Why have things moved from bad to worse since the deal was signed? Well, the deal was a scam for which we now demand full disclosure and full accountability. It is corrupt and rotten to the core. It is state capture by Mr. Ruto and company and a conspiracy against the country. Ruto's collapsing the country while feeding Kenyans on lullabies. Other than keeping the cost of oil permanently high in Kenya, the deal is costing the country dearly in terms of trade in petroleum with the landlocked neighbors. It is shrouded in deep secrecy. To date, only 2 documents have been made public. That is, the Master Framework Agreement with petroleum trading entities and the Open Tender System Modified Agreement with marketers. The Supplier Purchase Agreement between the Middle East oil firms and the hand-picked distributors in Kenya has never been seen. We challenge Mr. Ruto to publish this document. Nobody knows how Gulf Energy, Galana Oil Kenya Limited, and Oryx Energies Kenya Limited got nominated to handle local logistics. But the hand-picked distributors are selling oil to us at almost twice the price from bulk suppliers. These companies are also manipulating deliveries date ranges so that they can minimize on prices. We know that in August this year, 4 months after the deal, the government allowed Oryx Energies to sell oil at prices that had been inflated by 17%. In the Ruto deal, Oryx is a supplier of diesel to other oil marketing companies in the country. The excuse was to delay in discharging fuel at the jetty. This shady business model is being deployed by all the companies that were retained in the Ruto deal. They buy at low prices, delay discharging, then ask to be allowed to offload at higher prices, and the cost is passed on to the consumers. In the case of Oryx, it had bought the diesel at an average Platts price of $97.88. That is 14,182 shillings per barrel in July, but was allowed to sell the same to oil marketing companies at 114.5 US dollars, that is 16,585 shillings per barrel. Some of the companies charging the higher prices deliver more cargo than they were contracted to deliver, forcing Kenyans to buy more of the oil whose prices are inflated, hence the permanent high prices of petroleum products. The ministry is changing billing month to allow the oil firms quote higher prices. For instance, cargo that was bought in July when the price was low is allowed to quote higher August prices and pass the burden to the consumer. The deal that Ruto hailed as phenomenal has resulted in high landed costs as a result of structuring of the contract. The faults include the double counting of some cost elements and fixed freighted premium, which sometimes are higher by up to $50 per metric ton. The cost is passed on to the consumers. It also lacks flexibility, which further exacerbates the pricing model. Uganda has announced that it will no longer purchase petroleum products from Kenya because middlemen have inflated prices by up to 59%, imposing too high a cost on consumers. The exact same scenario is prevailing here. The middlemen President Museveni is talking about are Kenya government officials. I repeat, the middlemen President Museveni is talking about are Kenya government officials. The deal has interrupted supply. Gulf Energy, which manages up to 50% of government importation, has been experiencing serious challenges securing letters of credit. This is because the single bank that was picked to provide the letter of credit is struggling with big bad loans. Consequently, there is delay for clearance of importers to offload oil. Ships are queuing at sea for up to 18 days, awaiting a confirmation of a letter of credit in order to discharge, while the Kenya Pipeline Company goes without operations for days because there is nothing to process. Then the companies incur demurrage, which is transferred to the consumer. Under the open tender system, that's the old system, demurrage costs are 45,000 US dollars per day for the biggest tanker docking at the port of Mombasa, and $31,000 per day for the second biggest vessel. But under the Ruto deal, demurrage has risen up to $70,000 per day. This cost is passed on to the consumers at the pump. You will have noticed that Tanzania recently reduced the cost of petroleum products from 1st of November, while Kenyans remain the same or just marginally changed. Tanzania said it was reducing prices because of decrease in the world oil prices by an average of 5.68%, while premiums for importation of petroleum products had decreased by an average of 13% for super petrol, also known as premium motor gasoline or premium motor spirit, and 25% for automotive gas oil or diesel. We will not hear that story here because of the corrupt dealings written into the Ruto deal. As ships accumulate extra charges on the high seas, the money sits in an escrow account in a local bank where it earns interest. It remains unclear who the beneficiaries of the crude interest is. This deal has led to high cost of oil products sourced through the Northern Corridor transit route, that's Kenya route. The freight and premium rates for the May 2023 cargoes were higher in the Northern Corridor by 61% compared to the Central Corridor. Northern Corridor is the running Mombasa, Nairobi, Malaba, Kampala, and to DRC. The Central Corridor, the one that comes from Dar es Salaam all the way to Rwanda, Uganda, and DRC. That rise in freight and premium is reflected at the pump. That is what has pushed Uganda and other forward markets like South Sudan, Eastern DRC, Rwanda, and Burundi to consider importing goods through the Central Corridor or Tanzania route. Uganda is shifting to the Central Corridor, meaning that they are going to be using the port of Dar es Salaam or Tanga rather than Mombasa. The volume it ferries via Kenya pipeline has dropped by 52% from 70%. So other than making petroleum products ever more costly, the deal is going to kill the Kenya pipeline company as soon as this year. You need to know that it is the Ugandan market that earns the Kenya pipeline company foreign exchange. The transit volumes account for 51% of Kenya pipeline company's revenue, which stands at an average of 2.6 billion shillings per month. When the company loses in the volume transported, it results in higher tariffs, which is transferred to the local consumer in terms of higher cost of petroleum products. A 10% reduction in the transit volumes would result in a 5% increase in tariffs, which is reflected at the pumps in terms of cost of fuel. The change of route by landlocked trading partners will force a number of Kenyan oil marketing companies and logistic firms to close shop. Of course, this leads to job losses, loss of foreign exchange, loss of revenue for the country as a result of KPC losing transit share. Ideally, Kenya should have provided a pipeline and storage capacity allocation for Uganda market. Kenya should also have allowed the direct participation of the Uganda oil marketers in sourcing petroleum products through the Northern Corridor route. But because corruption was written into the deal, the Ruto administration could not allow neighbors in fear of exposure. Consequently, the KPC is set to lose substantial business to Tanzania. Uganda's shift to the Central Corridor will most certainly influence Rwanda, Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, and South Sudan. As KPC loses business, it will charge more for its product to stay afloat, hence the ever-rising cost of petroleum products. The deal only ended up creating irregular supplies and higher prices. Open tender system allowed for competitive sourcing of fuel. Monopolistic tendencies for purposes of maximizing profit goes against the demand for efficiency and the need for lower prices. It is going to drive a number of oil marketing firms out of business, leading to job losses and loss of revenue for the government. The deal that Ruto signed with the oil companies has excessively high freights and premiums compared to those witnessed in the open tender systems. They are as high as an additional $50 per metric ton. In the end, Kenya is losing billions of shillings in taxes because the three companies picked to spearhead this deal do not pay the 30% corporate tax. Shielding the three companies from this tax is the reason Ruto told Kenyans that it was a G2G deal. Your guess is as good as mine on who is pocketing the unpaid corporate tax. But the burden of the unpaid corporate tax is passed to Kenyans at the pump. Now, ladies and gentlemen, our stand as Azimio. 1. Ruto must immediately cancel the contract and revert to the open tender system, which ensured guaranteed supply of petroleum products. It has assigned responsibility to various players as opposed to the so-called G2G that is making Kenyans depend on inefficient and corrupt players. The open tender system was efficient, accountable, and competitive, and offered prices commensurate with international pricing model. 2. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission needs to move in, not to sanitize, but to get to the bottom of how and why we got into this deal and who is benefiting from it. 3. The men and women who came up with this self-serving deal must be charged and sacked. 4. The government must restore taxes to 8% from the 16% that came with the Finance Act. 5. The government must make public the so-called MoU between Kenya and Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. 6. The Ministry of Energy and Petroleum must make public the deal is signed with oil companies. 7. The Ministry of Energy and Petroleum must make public the supplier purchase agreement it signed with the oil companies. 8. The EACC and the Director of Criminal Investigations must investigate the tax compliance status and pricing model of the three oil companies. 9. We need a comprehensive brief on what the move by Uganda to pursue much of its petroleum needs through the Tanzanian Central Corridor means to our country, especially to the future of the Kenya Pipeline Company. End of statement. Thank you.
Labda kwa Kiswahili, Mheshimiwa Raila, katika siku za majuzi tumeona kama kuna mfanyabiashara tata ambaye anadai kwamba mafuta yake ambaye alileta ilinyakuliwa na serikali. Labda kwa mtazamo wako unaweza semaje kuhusiana na hayo? Kisha cha pili, where does this revelation of yours now put the ongoing national dialogue talks? Thank you.
Yeah. Yale ambayo yanafanyika, hiyo wafanyabiashara yenyewe inadhihirisha ukweli. Yale ni wale watu ambaye wametofautiana pamoja. Sasa mwingine anasema huyu hii shehena ni yangu, mwingine anasema hii shehena ni yangu. Wale pamoja. Hata wewe mwenyewe unaweza kushangaa yale ambayo yanafanyika. Mbona kama kuna shida mtu anashikwa usiku anafungwa macho? Kwa sababu gani? Kama jamaa hajaiba, hajafanya chochote, kama hata yeye ni mwizi, mbona ashike mchana na apeleke mahakamani? Ni wale ni wao wezi wawili wanashikana peke yao. Upande mwingine sisi tuko na na washirika wetu ambayo sisi tulituma kwa yale mazungumzo. Mmoja wao ndugu Eugene Wamala yuko hapa. Sisi tuliwaambia katika yale majadiliano kuna maneno ambayo sisi hatuwezi kuacha nje. Tuweka masharti, atukuna maneno ambayo mpaka tupate suluhu, haswa yale ambayo yanahusu wananchi wenyewe. Kwa mfano moja yao ni gharama ya maisha. Tumesema gharama ya maisha mpaka irudi chini. Hiyo ni moja ya masharti ya mazungumzo yetu. Ingine ni kuundwa kwa tume ya uchaguzi. 3 ni ukaguzi ya matokeo ya uchaguzi iliyopita. 4 ni mambo ya kutuingilia kwa vyama vingine vya kisiasa. Kuheshima kwa vyama vya kisiasa. Yale ya masharti. Lakini muhimu zaidi ni gharama ya maisha lazima irudi chini. Na wao wamesema vile inawezekana. Tumesema kwa mfano ile ushuru waliweka kwa mafuta itolewe kutoka 16% irudishe pale ilivyokuwa 8%. Hiyo ni moja yao. Na kadhalika na kadhalika. So tumesema kama hawawezi kukubali basi haviendi. Tumesema kama hawawezi kukubali yale, hiyo tunasema hakuna mazungumzo, hakuna maafikiano.
Over the weekend, you alluded that the inflation of prices on petroleum, on fuel, was about 30 shillings. Maybe expound on that and how these you call cartels are fleecing Kenyans' pockets at the pump, and how much, by how much?
No, I mentioned the other time, and you're going to find it in the statement that I've just read there, how prices are being inflated and then passed on to the consumer. I mentioned, for example, you'll find that you're being charged 217 shillings, but actual price would be 187 shillings. Now, where we are not sure is how that 30 shillings is being distributed, who is the beneficiary. But I've also explained to you how the whole of this process was conceived, how it was then executed, and how it is actually hurting the consumer down here. You'll find, for example, that ships are taking very long. They're waiting when letters of credit have not been confirmed, incurring demurrage charges. The demurrage charges themselves have also been increased. It used to be $45, $1,000 per day. It is now $70,000 under this deal. And all that is being passed on to the consumer. So what is happening here is a complete rip-off. People are paying for air, and these people are very happy with this.
Langu ni ombi tu kama unaweza fafanua kwa lugha ya Kiswahili ujumbe wako kuhusiana na swala nzima la mafuta.
Tumesema kwanza tuliambiwa ati hii mpango ni serikali na kwa serikali. Yaani ndio kwa Kiswahili inaitwa G2G, government to government. Lakini thibitisho iko hapa ya kwamba sio mpango ya serikali kwa serikali. Serikali ya Kenya hajaweka mkataba na serikali ya Saudi Arabia au ya Emirates. Hii ni kati ya wizara ya kawi, yani ya wa Kenya, na makampuni moja ya Emirates na ingine ya kule Saudia, moja inaitwa Aramco. Alafu sasa wao hapa makampuni mengine matatu wamepewa kandarasi. hakuna mtu anajua vile hizo kandarasi lipewa. Manake zamani kulikuwa na kitu ambacho inaitwa open tender system. Mimi kama nimeshakuwa waziri wa kawi wakati mwingine, chini yangu tulikuwa tunafanya makampuni yote ya kuuza mafuta walikuwa wanakubaliwa kushiriki kwenye tenda. Kufanya tenda, alafu unachukua yule ambaye kuna bei ya chini zaidi. Sasa hiyo kampuni ndio inapewa ruhusa ya kwenda kuleta mafuta na kuwauzia wale makampuni zingine hapa. Ikifika tena baada ya miezi mitatu, hiyo tenda nyingine inafanyika namna hiyo. Lakini sasa hiyo imetolewa. Sasa serikali ndio inanunua kutoka katika hizo makampuni mawili ya Saudia na ya Emirates, alafu inakuja kuuzia watu hapa. Lakini hata hakuna ubaya na hiyo. Kinafanyika ni kwamba katikati hapo wameweka vikwazo zingine, alafu ujanja zingine hapo ambayo wanazidisha naye bei. Kwa hivyo bei inakuwa juu zaidi kuliko kama ingekuwa inakuja under ile OTS system. Na hiyo bei yote inapitishwa kwa mwananchi. Mwananchi huko chini inabeba hiyo mzigo. Kwa sababu ya yote pale ambayo yao jamaa wanakula hapo katikati, hapa kuna hii panya ambayo inakula hapo katikati, hiyo ndio inasukumwa kwa wananchi hapa. Na kwa kila lita ambayo unanunua kuna shilingi 30 ambayo imewekwa zaidi juu yake. Na hiyo inakuliwa na hao watu katikati yao. Ndio tumemwambia Bwana Ruto, utuambie sisi hao watu ni kina nani? Na kwa hiyo unawajua, wewe ndio uliwaweka pale. Kwa sababu gani umeweka hao pale? Wananchi yanaumia hapa chini.
Na swali Mheshimiwa Raila Odinga. Jina langu ni Sydney Chazima kutoka NTV. Swali la kwanza ni kuhusu tunamuita njeri wa mafuta. Sijui kama umesikia hilo swala kuhusu uagizaji wa mafuta kule Mombasa. Kuna meli ambayo imeshikwa ilikuwa na mafuta kuleta nchini. Je, mama huyu ni mmoja wapo ya wale watu ambao wanaongelea? Alafu swali la pili, tulimsikia Mheshimiwa Kalonzo Musyoka akisema hivi majuzi kwamba ikiwa mazungumzo ya uwiano kati ya Azimio na Kenya Kwanza hayataendelea mbele, basi mnaweza rejea katika maandamano. Je, hilo ni wazo sawia na lako?
Kwanza hiyo swali ya pili, kwanza hawajamaliza. Hatutaki kuanza kutoa masharti sasa. Wakifika wakati ambayo itakuwa wametofautiana kabisa, kuna mafikiano, sisi wenyewe tutatoa taarifa yetu. Kwa hivyo wakati hii sitaki kutoa hata vitisho vingine. Inaonekana ya kwamba sisi tunatoa vitisho, manake hatutaki watu wawe na mafikiano. Sisi bado tunawapatia fursa kuongea. Pili, hiyo mama mafuta, huyo mama mamona na unajua biashara ya mafuta, unajua gharama yake, pesa ambayo inatakikana ufanye biashara ya mafuta bilioni 17. Angalia sura yake kama yeye au anawakilisha watu wengine. Sasa wale ambao wanawakilisha ndio tunataka kujua, maana yake mingi ni kama sarakasi.
Asanteni sana. Tutatumieni nakala ya Dossier hii kwa uchambuzi kamili. Asanteni sana.